Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Korman Productions, here to talk about Cobra Kai, Season 3, Episode 3, titled, Now You're Gonna Pay. As usual, this is not a spoiler-free dojo, so if you have not yet watched the episode, I would highly recommend that you go and do so. If you like this video, please hit me up with a subscribe. We open the episode with Pastor Robby, one of Johnny's friends, carrying out one of his sermons. Robby is played by Ron Thomas and was in the original Karate Kid. He also made an appearance last season. He only has 11 credits to his name, but that only begins to tell the story of this man. He seems to be quite an interesting character. I read this little blurb from his own page. Sensei Ron Thomas is one of the world's leading personal development trainers and life mastery experts, an inspiring speaker, self-help author, life coach, and world martial art champion. Ron is also an internationally recognized actor. His role as Bobby Brown in the iconic film The Karate Kid and the new hit series Cobra Kai is forever etched in the hearts of fans around the world. One of his books is titled Positive Thinking is for Sissies, written in 2009, and that certainly sounds like a book written by a former Cobra Kai. I'll include a link in the video description if you wish to know more about him. Anyway, back to the episode. Robby is doing his sermon when he's interrupted by Johnny, who's clearly drunk and making a fool of himself and of Robby. And eventually, Robby asks God for forgiveness, and Johnny wonders what? For this, Robby says, and then proceeds to spin kick him off his feet. We cut to Johnny's son in juvenile detention, reading a book, Lord of the Flies by William Goldring. This is something I did not notice the first time around, but upon rewatch, I laughed at this because it seems kind of appropriate. It's one of the few times that Robby's scenes did anything for me during the course of this episode, or really this season. Eventually, Robby notices a fellow inmate getting harassed and bullied, and after getting hit, he asks him, "Are you okay?" And this scene is beyond awkward. Not very good for this. Robby is told that he has a phone call, and it turns out to be Daniel Larusso. And of course, he instantly hangs up on him. Well, that didn't go very well. We cut to Daniel's perspective. His wife wanders by his side. Daniel says that Robby still won't take his calls. He feels like he betrayed him. And Daniel's wife says, "You helped him. He would have gotten a much harsher sentence if you didn't do what you did." And again, I already made the argument that Daniel should have handled that differently in the last video, but that's neither here nor there. Amanda goes on to say, he's a teenager, and people have a way of coming around. Like, for instance, I hated your cousin. That being Louie, of course. And even I have to admit that he's a heck of a salesman. Daniel asks if business is getting any better. And nope, it's not. Sales are still low. Amanda apparently scrapped all the karate tie-ins from the marketing. So no more kicking the competition. This is to distance themselves from the school fight that is pretty much the cause for their business being in the bad shape that it's in. And that's when Tom Cole, who we last saw in the first season, the owner of a rival dealership, comes in with Lanouche, Daniel's and Amanda's former salesman who went to Tom Cole. Tom Cole, after being his typical prickish self, gets around to saying he wants to buy Daniel's dealership. We cut to Miguel in the hospital, who is soon to be visited by Samantha, who I don't even recall seeing in the last episode. Miguel is not unpleased to see her. He mentions that he has a surgery on Friday from a doctor out of state who supposedly performs miracles. And we all thought this was going to be Allie. That was a popular theory amongst Cobra Kai fans, that Allie would come in and basically be his surgeon and save his life. Sam gives him a card that says, "You occupy my thoughts," a reference to their romance in the first season, where Miguel ends up winning her and Octopi. Also, that's my sense of humor to a T. Hawk interrupts the reunion and is none too pleased to see Samantha. When she's about to go, he says to her, "You have some nerve coming here." And she says, "I just want to help." And Hawk replies, "Princess, you've helped enough." Hawk seems to blame Miguel for his current predicament, and this is an attitude that will go on towards Miyagi-Do for the rest of the season. Cut to Bobby and Johnny discussing the situation between his two sons. His surrogate son in Miguel and his actual son in Robby. Bobby tells him he knows that he's upset, but he can't blame himself for what Robby did. And Johnny says, "I'm not even allowed to see him because of probation I'm on for that little garage thing in the first episode of the season." Bobby points out that he's lucky he only got probation, and he has Bobby to thank for that. Bobby says to him, "How about we make a deal? Challenge yourself to do positive things and to be a better person." And Johnny says, "I already tried that. I put in everything I had into my students. I taught them to be tough and to show mercy." Okay, look, Johnny. You can strive to be a better person. That does not always mean that everything's going to go perfectly swimmingly. And the fact is, everything that happened isn't really on you. Yes, Johnny and Daniel share some blame for what occurred there, to an extent. But the fact of the matter is, he doesn't control the universe. A lot of what happened there was out of his control. And some of the rivalry that occurred there was stoked by Kreese. The fact of the matter is, bad things happen sometimes. Johnny goes on to say he thought he was doing the right thing. And Bobby tells him, "You were." And then Johnny asks, "Then why did all this happen? You want to punish me? Fine. But Robby and Miguel are just kids." And Bobby says, "I know. It isn't fair." And he says, "You got to remember that you don't always do the right thing just because it always works out. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Both those kids need you, and you need to be there for them, whether it works out or not." Bobby tells him he can help him out with Robby. The detention center will let him in if he's accompanied by a member of the clergy. As far as Miguel is concerned, he can make a small donation, but they're still trying to build things up, and they don't have a lot of funds. He suggests that he ask Sid for some help. Sid, of course, being his former stepdad, or current stepdad, or whatever. Sid, played by Ed Asner, that we last saw in the first season. Johnny doesn't want to do that, and I don't blame him, and says simply that he will figure something out. They make arrangements to see Robby tomorrow. Cut to Amanda and Daniel talking to Tom Cole about his offer, which they are not impressed by. Here's where I admit to being a little bit confused. I was under the impression that Daniel owned multiple dealerships, not just one. In the pilot episode, Johnny, after seeing a billboard, makes a reference saying, "Another one?" So I am under the impression that Daniel owns more than one car dealership. A bunch, in fact. But Tom Coles is only buying this dealership. Unless buying this dealership means buying all of them. But that's not the impression that I get. In a later scene, Tom Cole is like, "You're looking at the new owner of Van Nuys Larusso dealership." So that's just the one dealership, not all of them. Maybe given the state of things, it wouldn't hurt Larusso to scale back a little bit. So giving up the one dealership to an admitted prick is not necessarily the end of the world for them. They'd still have the business. But again, that's not how this is presented in the episode. So, if someone who's watching this would like to set me straight on where I am wrong, I would be happy to hear from you. Please leave a comment and let me know where I am wrong in my analysis here. We cut away from this conversation to Louis and Lanouche. Lanouche eventually reveals that Tom Cole just signed a deal with a major Japanese car company to be the exclusive distributor of their cars. This was the agreement that Larusso Auto had. But now, because of the bad publicity surrounding the school fight, they're going to lose it. Daniel and Amanda tell Tom Cole to take a hike. They aren't going to sell to him. And after they leave, Louis tells them that they need to talk. Cut to Miyagi-Do, who's having a car wash fundraiser to raise funds for Miguel's surgery. We briefly see Moon, who is barely in this season. Samantha tells her that she is surprised that Moon is there, given that she's a feminist. And Moon says that she's a sex-positive feminist. Our bodies are an expression. I looked into this because I was curious, and as it turns out, this is actually a thing. The Wikipedia entry reads, "Sex-positive feminism is a movement that began in the early 1980s, centering on the idea that sexual freedom is an essential component of women's freedom. Some feminists became involved in the sex-positive feminist movement in response to efforts by anti-pornography feminists to put pornography at the center of a feminist explanation of women's oppression." Interesting. A couple of guys drive up, hoping to get served by a pretty girl in a bikini. Instead, they get Chris. And Nathaniel yoinks the money out of the guy's hand. So, well, they're stuck with this. At least they know, in their hearts, that they did a good deed. And I'm sure they feel good about that. We see two motorcycles driving up, and the Cobra Kai theme. And it turns out to be Mitch and Hawk, who see the car wash and are not happy that they are doing something in Miguel's name. And oh, they are going to pay. They will not get away with this. Cut to Johnny, who's shaved and looks like the reformed Johnny from last season. He's at a job interview. And he says during the interview that he's pretty sure he remembers how to get on the internet. And the guy who's doing the interview thinks this is a joke. It's not, I'm sorry to tell you. It seems like the interview is going well, but then his various crimes come into play. And Johnny does a terrible job selling this. There's no real way to spin the garage thing, but he could have done a better job with the assaulting the minor things, which he only did to defend Miguel, and not even really that. He was defending his car, but he could have spun it as sticking up for Miguel, But he doesn't even try to make this sound good, believing in the interviewers, "Oh, we're just a couple of guys here talking. No judgments." Suffice it to say, he doesn't get the job. A brief look at his paper, which includes ads for jobs he's trying to apply to, includes a question mark over dancer. Somehow I'm thinking, Johnny, that's not going to work out too well for you either. Cut to Robby, who is eating in the cafeteria, when he notices Samantha talking about the car wash in Miguel's name on TV. An HD TV, I might add, in a juvenile detention center. Hold on a second. There's an HD TV in a juvenile detention center? There's a TV at all? I mean, maybe that's how it is, but really? The bullies come over to give Robby some crap. And this scene is perfectly fine, except for Tanner Buchanan's acting. Total blank slate here. I totally have no clue what Robby is thinking or feeling at this point. There's just nothing there. I don't know if this is on the director or the actor, but either way, he does not do a very good job here. The bully seems eager to fight, and Robby says, "My karate is for self-defense." And the other guy strikes first. And this fight does not go well for Robby at all. Cut to Johnny going to a pawn shop, a different one than he was trying to get to in the first season. Unfortunately, it's the same guy who wouldn't take his crap before. He tries to give him a computer with a dead battery because he doesn't know that he can plug the computer in. Okay, look. The whole Johnny doesn't understand technology thing was funny. I mean, it still is. But here it's just goofy. Come on, you're telling me that he doesn't know that he has to plug in the computer? His computer would have lasted maybe a day at best. And that's not something we get an indication of. He seems to be using it more than just the one day. Even with that, Miguel wouldn't have told him how to use that thing? Miguel wouldn't have told him to plug the computer in? Come on, this is just not believable. He also tries to sell him a Dodge Caravan. The stolen one from Larusso Auto. Larusso doesn't seem to be too inclined to get it back. But if he were to sell to this guy, that would be considered a crime, wouldn't it? Stealing it and then selling it? Would he even be able to get away with that? But the guy has no interest in taking anything from Johnny, and he leaves with the sage advice to go find somebody who does have something valuable to sell. Cut to Louie, Daniel, and Amanda. Daniel enters the scene wondering where everyone is, and Louie says that he figured they should shut down, batten down the hatches, so they can figure out what they're going to do. Amanda is pretty convinced that they should sell to Tom Cole, and Daniel doesn't want to do it. Daniel eventually starts to tell a speech about how he formed his love for cars. When he was younger, in his teens, they had a beat-up vehicle, station wagon, that barely drove without being pushed first. And then Miyagi gave him the yellow car, and he fell in love. The yellow car was a 47 Ford. I don't think I mentioned that. As it turns out, Miyagi was the one who pushed him into selling cars. It wasn't LaRusso's idea. He thought car salesmen were sleazy, and Louie pipes up and says, "That's a BS stereotype," except it totally applies to him, which is why the joke is funny. Sorry if I killed that by explaining it. But Miyagi told him, "Daniel-san, must follow passion. A man who works for passion is always richer than a person who works for money. And we cut to Amanda, who is mouthing these words. And it's clear that she's heard this story before. She might have even been there for it. And Daniel says, he was right. The goal was never to be the number one seller in the valley. The goal was to get the customers to have the same feeling that he had when he got his first car. That's what I did, and that is why we were successful. Amanda gently says that without Toyota, we can't compete. She loves what they built there. Here, rather. But they have to sell, or they might end up with nothing. Amanda suggests to Louie that they go and do some inventory, leaving Daniel alone to think. And we see a flashback to Miyagi and Daniel, and every time they do this, they get me. Call me a sucker, but I fall for this every time they do it. And from that flashback, Daniel seems to get some inspiration. Cut to Robby. He's about to go to bed, or lay down, or whatever, and the bullies are by his bed. And they say, "Oh, we didn't realize this was your bed. I just needed a pillow. You don't mind, do ya?" And Robby does nothing, as the bullies take his pillow. A guard then informs the inmates that the following people will have visitors the next day, and one of them is Robby Keene, who is very curious to know who is visiting him, and is surprised to learn that it's his father. A complicated array of emotions come over his face, and hey, what do you know, Tanner? That is acting. Cut to Johnny, who's decided to go and visit Sid, played by Ed Asner. I generally like Ed Asner, but god darn do I despise this character. And you're pretty much supposed to, so good job, Mr. Asner. He's there to secure some funding for Miguel's surgery. And Sid is pretty much mocking him the entire time. I wouldn't at all mind a scene where Johnny beats the ever-loving crap out of him. But that's probably never going to happen. Sid refuses to give him the money at the end, and Johnny simply says, "You're a cold old man." And he responds, "Don't you forget it." William Sabaka's line reading of "You're a cold old man" is interesting, because there's no real emotion in it. It's just simply a fact. He's over it. He does not care. And he's not at all surprised by this outcome. But on the way out the door, he steals a piece of art, which presumably has some value. Well, there's another crime for Johnny, and I planned on taking note of all the times that crimes are committed without any consequences whatsoever. I didn't really see any in the first couple episodes because those crimes were punished. But here, that's crime number 1. And then we get cut to Nathaniel at the car wash, all by himself. And here comes crime number 2. As Hawk and Mitch drive up on him and take his money, and then beat the ever-loving crap out of him. I don't know how much money is in that envelope, but the amount of money would certainly determine the sentence for that particular crime. And then, of course, there's the assault. Their plan is to take the money and then tell Miguel that the money came from him. Or them, rather. So, he's still going to get the money and all, and that's what matters, right? This isn't even really the worst thing that Hawk does this season, but we will get there. Cut to a meeting with Daniel, Amanda, Tom Cole, and Lanouche. Tom Cole is magnanimous in victory. Just kidding. He's a prick as usual. But, as it turns out, Daniel has decided not to sign and instead has a little finger on one of the pages. Lanouche has switched sides, and Tom leaves empty-handed. And Amanda says, now this has to work. And Lanouche is surprised. Wait a second, this isn't a guarantee? We don't quite know yet what Daniel is up to. We see a brief scene of Samantha learning that both the money is gone and they kicked the ever-loving crap out of Nathaniel. We then cut to the hospital where Johnny comes with a check towards Miguel's family's surgery. He'd prefer to keep his name out of it, but as he turns around, Carmen and her mother is standing right there. So much for that. Carmen's reception of Johnny remains cool, but he does thank him for the money. And apparently, a very blonde doctor has come to do Miguel's surgery. We see the blonde from behind, and we are totally supposed to think that this is Allie. The creators are screwing with us. The creators have spent some time reading the forums. After a beat, when she turns around, it is not in fact Allie. Johnny says that he has to go, but his grandma stops him and asks him to pray. But Johnny has to go somewhere, he says, specifically to see Robby. But his grandma begs gently, and this is enough to persuade Johnny to stay. That happened a little bit too easily. There's no reason why you couldn't have gone and seen Robby and then come back and prayed with them. You're supposed to be there for both kids, according to Bobby's advice. Here you fail completely to be there for Robby, and once again he has complete justification to be angry with you, as you've chosen Miguel over him. Cut to Bobby, who is with Robby. Hey, that rhymes. And Johnny is nowhere in sight. Bobby assures him that he will be around. But Robby knows the truth. He isn't coming. Cut to Samantha at Miyagi-Do, deciding to take up the reins herself in training because Cobra Kai has never stopped. Dimitri says he's more than looking forward to learning some moves to his repertoire. Look at all Dimitri getting all cocky. Nathaniel asks, what if your dad finds out? And Samantha says, he won't. He's out of town. And we cut to Daniel in some office. We don't know where. But as it turns out, he's in Tokyo at the Tanyo business, trying to save his own company. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the episode, which mostly feels like setup for the future storylines. It's not a bad episode. It's not a great episode either. Robby's scenes kind of drag it down a little bit, mostly down to Tanner Buchanan's performance. He is capable of better than this, but he is way too subdued. And if that's a director's decision, it's a bad one. Johnny's scenes with Bobby towards the beginning of the episode were a clear highlight of this episode. Brilliant performance by William Sabaka. As usual, I think he does a great job in this series. And I thought the Ralph Macchio Daniel scene, where he's telling the story of how he became a car dealership, was pretty great in itself too. But that's all I have for you for this video and this episode. If you like this video and my content in general, there's a number of ways you can support the channel. You can follow me on Korman Productions, my Facebook group. You can follow me on Twitter at Korman Productions. you can buy something from my Korman Productions store on Zazzle, you can buy me a copy. All of these links will be in the video's description. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Korman Productions, signing off.